Hello, guys. We're back. Today, we have Rajiv with us. He's the co-founder and CEO of Tandem, the virtual office for your team, backed by Y Combinator and a16z. Tandem lets you see who's around and collaborate in one click, bringing serendipity and flow to your hybrid team. Rajiv studied bioengineering at Princeton and worked at Yahoo before starting this amazing future of work company. Hello, Rajiv. It's nice having you. How are you doing?
Hey, doing well. It's great to be here.
So to kick things off, Rajiv, let me just jump right in. Why did you start Tandem in a time where you had stuff like Zoom, maybe some people collaborating over Google Meet? What did you see was missing in the marketplace, or what problem were you looking to solve with Tandem?
So it started out as a very personal problem. With me and my co-founders, we were working on a project, a cryptocurrency project actually, in late 2018, early 2019. And my co-founder and another friend we were working with had a kid, and we all started working from home. And so we went from working in person every single day, those brainstorms, those moments of inspiration that you have together, to all of a sudden working from home. We didn't feel like a team anymore. So a couple things happened. We were feeling that shift, and we were trying all of these different tools. And also the Web3 project we were working very clearly failed. It was an exchange. We had very clear signal right up front. So we turned towards our own problem and thought, well, we build productivity apps. We built them at Yahoo. We built them at startups before Yahoo. What can we build here to fix that problem? And we went through a bunch of different iterations until we found something that really unlocked that, and it had to do with, presence, like showing who's around and reducing friction. And then as we were kind of thinking about the format, we were looking at the market, and this is, again, before the pandemic, but we felt there was a huge potential here because, one, companies were already going remote. And then two, every large company at some scale started to resemble a distributed company or remote company, with people in different offices for the same company, or people traveling, or people working from home sometimes. And so we felt there was a huge potential. We just didn't expect how quickly, the world would go remote.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I used Tandem 2020 August or October or something like that, like late 2020, and I absolutely enjoyed using it. It was one of the clubs at Georgia Tech. They were trying to test it out. I don't know, it was a beta or something, all that kind of stuff. And I absolutely loved the idea because it's nice to see what other people are doing when you're working with other people and having that sense of camaraderie between the people. So let's dive deep into future of work. And since you got this idea back in 2018-19 as a problem that you face personally. So my question to you would be, where do you see the future of work industry going in 5 years from now? Because there are sub companies Elon Musk recently came out saying, I want everybody in the office 40 hours a week. And there are some companies saying, work from home, have that flexibility, but we need 100% from your end so that we can build the company forward. So where do you see future of work going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of dimensions and a lot of dimensions to build towards. But I think on that one specific point, which is what's the cadence of people in the office, people remote, or what's the balance there? I think we're in a first of all, there are good reasons on both sides, right? There are good reasons to have people remote, and there are good reasons why the office is a very special place. It unlocks connection, collaboration better than anything else. Faster than anything else, and technology still has a lot to bridge in that gap. But even thinking about all those tensions, I think ultimately we're going to end up in a hybrid world, which means some people in the office some of the time, some people never in the office, some people in the office most of the time. And the reason is offices are powerful, but at the same time, not everybody can be in the office. And flexibility, the flexibility to live and work where you want and how you want, is just enormous, right? And very few people are able or willing to give that up to be in the office. And so first of all, what's happening now is kind of this push and pull and these kind of oscillations as in company policy as people figure out what's optimal for them, their team, their company. And it's going to take a little while to calm down into steady state. But then when we think about what's optimal in the future, let's assume we're in this flexible hybrid steady state where, again, some people are in the office some of the time. How do we prevent the second-class citizen problem, right? How do we make everyone feel equally included in the discussions? There's a lot that technology has to bridge for that. And, we're working on one piece of that, the real-time piece. How do you feel like you're in the office when you're not physically in the office? But there are other things that have to be worked out, like capacity planning, how do you figure out where to be in the office, like the distribution of desks. The office needs to evolve to be best at the things it's best at: collaboration, gathering, like in-person meetings. So there's a lot that's I think going to happen over the next few years.
Well, that's interesting. And like any product has, you would aim to have a certain key feature for yourself or certain key elements that you'd want in Tandem as well, whether that's reimagining the office space and making sure that everyone has a virtual office space, right? I've seen that's a key feature from what I've understood. So what are those key elements or key creative designs that you want to have in Tandem, or you've incorporated in Tandem, that you think sets Tandem apart from anything else, like something like Gatherly or Zoom or even Google Meet?
Yeah. Tandem is really designed to be collaborative and functional, and it's designed for speed. So the first thing that people notice generally is that when you see a list of your teammates, you get a sense for what they're working on. So this goes back into presence. And the way we do that is through a combination of signals. We show who's free and busy, who's away from their keyboard, who's at the keyboard, who's in a meeting or not in a meeting, who's in a current Tandem room, and then also what work app are you on. And that's very similar to Discord, except instead of showing what game you're on, we show, are you on Figma or VS Code or Notion? And that gives you a lot of just an intuitive feeling of presence. And then the second thing is speed. One click to talk. You can wave at somebody to see if they're free. A lot of the interactions are just very, very fast. Another thing that people have noticed, because we're focused on collaboration with your team, a lot of the collaborative features when you're in a call are very, very fast and very immediate. And the one that most people notice straight away is screen share is interactive by default. When I share my screen, you can point on my screen, you can use remote control to kind of work with me on something on my screen. So is these features that make it feel like you're just in the same room. And if we want to work on my laptop, I can just turn my laptop to you. That's the feeling we're going for.
That's fair enough, because like I saw a very, very like earlier version of the product, like Tandem, when it was like, I think then it only had the option to say like, see what the other person is working on at that particular time. You didn't have like screen share, or perhaps like move the cursor with the other person you're sharing it with. Maybe it had, I didn't use that particular feature. So I see like the idea came in like 2018, 19, where you were working on a product and you faced a problem. But since I see you've been shipping like great features to Tandem, so where does the motivation come from? Do you like understand markets? Do you see what's happening in the market? Speak to current people who are trying to bridge hybrid and in-person work and talk to them about the problems they face?
A combination of the above. So we're always talking to customers and getting feedback from customers on what they're using, what's not working, what they would like, and that's a big piece of what we choose to build. What are kind of missing features, or what's the thing that would really unlock their team? And then secondarily, like we have our perspective on the market, again, from what the customers are experiencing. Like we've been tracking sort of the return to office and how quickly and in what form companies are returning to the office for a while. And for those kind of big shifts, we make big bets and we build kind of big new experiences. So the latest one we launched was a couple of months ago. It's an extension to Tandem called Hybrid Spaces, and they are like like Tandem rooms, but they map to a physical office. You can have one for the SF office or for a floor of an office. And it lets your remote teammates click into and teleport around the office and feel like they're at the office when they're not there. And the way it does that is by using familiar conferencing hardware. And you can set it up in the open floor. You could set it up in common areas. And it creates this kind of, magical ability for remote people to join in on spontaneous conversations, to say hi in the morning, to have the meeting before and after the meeting, those hallway conversations. So that was a pretty radical thing we launched. And that comes from, again, tracking the market over the last few years and really trying to think a few steps ahead of where are we going to feel the pain in this next shift?
Something very interesting and I'd want to understand is we have the metaverse coming, and what do you think Tandem's approach to the metaverse is going to be, considering you're looking so heavy to make the office space not disappear when you're at home? You want that culture to still remain. Are you thinking about incorporating that somehow? How is that going to affect your monetization, if it does in any way? And what are your plans for taking up the inevitable metaverse, as people say?
So I think of the metaverse as maybe the future of the virtual office. And I think within that, there's going to be an evolution of the virtual office into something that maybe is more undeniably a metaverse. The fundamental things about connection, collaboration, presence, those are going to remain. They're just going to take a different shape. And that'll be very interesting to see and track and build towards. The relationship between the metaverse office or the virtual office and the physical office, that is actually, I think, where we'll see the most profound shift over the next few years. Because before the pandemic, you're either remote, and then you could have called anything a virtual office. You could call Slack a really bad virtual office if that's all you're using, right? But now with the advent of more fully featured virtual offices, that gets more compelling. The physical office also needs to evolve. I mentioned some of the ways it's evolving. If you're not in the office every single day, the office needs to serve a different purpose. So if we just stepping back a bit, as we go forward, both the physical and the virtual offices need to evolve, and they need to bridge with one another. And that's where I think things are going to be really interesting. For example, if you're in the physical office, where are your remote teammates? You often forget them because you're not just fixed on your desk. You're moving around the space. And where are your remote teammates? It's hard. They feel very distant. So how do we represent the metaverse office in the physical office? And vice versa. If you're in the physical office, if you're remote, how do you get visibility on who's in the physical office? Well, you could try and ask people if they're in the physical office, or there could be some sort of presence, or maybe there's a way to, with 3D cameras, represent the physical office in the metaverse. That would be the most skeuomorphic, literal way. But there are a lot of more functional ways in between that could be practical.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because a lot of people have been trying to use augmented reality or virtual reality to achieve that, in my opinion. I think Roblox signed deals with Adidas and a bunch of other companies. Starbucks is trying to get in the game and all that kind of stuff. So you, as a personnel at Tandem, you're trying to bridge that conversion from office to the hybrid mode where people can rejuvenate with their rejuvenate and work with their users. So while people in college or our listeners in college or high school are building products, how do you think they should approach building products in this realm? Is it they should talk to people about why they want to come to the metaverse, or is it they should talk to people, they should think about what are the ways in which people would adapt it? Because it's very counterintuitive. People don't know what they want, and interviewing people wouldn't give a lot of information, but we want to know how people interact with their laptop or their mobile phone. So what is the approach our listeners should take?
Well, when you're thinking about the future of work, unless you're thinking on a very long time horizon, you're thinking about the future of you're thinking about different ways to work that resemble what we do now. So here's one thought. When we think about the metaverse, you could think about like virtual reality. But if you're thinking about the future of work, people don't work in virtual reality. So it's very difficult to build collaboration experiences that make sense when you need to transplant everything from where you do work, which is your laptop or your phone or meeting rooms, to virtual reality. It's almost like, let's say you had let's say you were in a physical building and the open floor, or in desks, but then every meeting you had to walk across the street to another building. That would be terrible. That'd be really annoying, right? So if you're thinking about the metaverse, I'd encourage you to think about it more in the not literally virtual reality, but more like a digital representation that's immersive, and that's hopefully closer to where we're actually doing work. Now, for the purpose of social or gaming applications, you have a lot more leeway because it doesn't need to tie into other work. But if you're thinking about working with other tools, working between multiple tools and multiple people, it becomes kind of difficult to build something usable in a virtual reality metaverse if you're not doing work there for 8 hours a day.
Something that I've read and I think is pretty interesting is that that I see lacking in something like Google Meet or Zoom is the trust you build among people, like you've mentioned, where your people were the other people, right? And that is something I surely think with Tandem or something like Microsoft Mesh, if it becomes very public at some point, that will occur or that will happen. So maybe since you're already in this business, have you had any numbers or anything to understand the productivity rates, like how productive people do become, or have you been able to get into the rates of efficiency or productivity that people go through when being on Tandem compared to anything else? And how do you support or not support any statistic that comes up?
The overall productivity of an organization is difficult to directly measure. It's something we definitely want to do in the future, but it's difficult to measure, at the stage we're at right now. But one of the things that we do track is just the pattern of conversations. So if we back up, aside from feeling more connected to your team and the fact that Tandem's much more efficient, why is this problem of connection when you're remote important? Well, there are lots of reasons, flexibility, coordination, but at the societal level or at the human level, talking builds trust faster than anything else. And there's some evidence for this. There's a great study out of University of Washington called Being There versus Seeing There, where they measured in a sort of iterated prisoner's dilemma type experiment how trust built in person versus video versus voice versus chat. And the rough numbers are trust builds extremely quickly in person. And then with video, it takes about twice as long. With voice, it takes about 3 times as long, but they all eventually get there. So it's a little slower. And then chat never gets to anywhere close to the same level of trust. It's a very big difference. And so like the conclusion, stepping back, is talking in real time builds trust. And then we ask, well, why is trust important other than, it feels unpleasant to work with people we don't trust? Well, trust is just one way of measuring the strength of a relationship and the strength of group relationships. And a better way a more precise way of characterizing trust in a group is psychological safety, right? And psychological safety as a group phenomenon has been studied extensively by Google and other research labs, and it is the most powerful factor for organizational velocity. So if we were to sum it up, this is overly simplistic. Talking builds trust, and trust is speed. Like just very, very simply. And so one of the things we track is how often are we unlocking hallway conversations where you don't have to wait for a meeting to talk with people. And one kind of cool statistic is that over half of the calls on Tandem are under 15 minutes. It really opens up those quick conversations, the spontaneity. And yes, of course, scheduled meetings are a big part of how people talk. Co-working for hours in a table is like another part of how people talk. But those quick conversations are really fundamental to what we unlock.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just as a follow-up, it's pretty interesting to know how, you have a metric as meeting times can just show how important or whether you're just meeting your goals. As I've been in Tandem, like when I worked at my previous internship at Ox, and you just hop into a call, come out of it, and it's really when you have a doubt or two, you just need to clear it, get that itch off your head, and it really helps you do it very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Versus you don't know if they're free, and so you have to send them a message or schedule a meeting in 1 or 2 days, and then you have to remember the context for that meeting, and then the meeting's probably going to be half an hour because you're not going to schedule a 5-minute meeting. And then once you're in a meeting, the formality is so much higher. You feel like you need to talk about multiple topics. It needs to have a certain, weight or gravity. And it does feel a little bit more transactional. It's less like human. It's less just a, quick moment with your coworkers. So there's a lot of other stuff beyond the metrics that kind of goes into why is spontaneity so important? Why is serendipity so important?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was just thinking about this. Like right now, we're having a conversation like because of the product that you've built, and it's kind of biased, like because we know you're building in that realm. But a lot of people that have been talking to, and you said you launched the Spaces product, which also involves a lot of like hardware stuff, like people buying hardware and inculcating in their system. But a lot of people that I've been talking to recently are saying that employees or people working from home aren't at their like 100% efficiency because everything that has been going out at their home. I really wanted to hear like an unbiased opinion that you have, like how people are reacting towards like building that infrastructure or buying that hardware infrastructure versus getting their employees back to office so that they can have that maximum 100% efficiency.
Well, I think people are investing in both. People are investing in hardware that makes the office more hybrid friendly, and they're investing in making the environment better for people to come back to the office because there's power there. I think mandating that people come back to the office a certain amount of the time is kind of a dead end, but we're seeing a lot of companies try. If one succeeds, I think they'll lose some employees, but it will perhaps be better in some dimensions for the people who come because you do get really, really high kind of effortless collaboration in the office if you're willing to pay the cost. And the cost is like you will lose some employees. You're going to lose a lot of time in the commute, and this flexibility goes down. But so there's a trade-off there. But we're seeing companies invest in both, in making the office better, making the office more attractive for employees, but just better at what the office is good at, and also outfitting the office for hybrid work. And it's not just Tandem Spaces on the open floor. It also goes into a lot of companies are investing more in conferencing hardware. They're being more thoughtful about how they arrange, like getting more phone booths, for example, just rethinking the office in a world where a large chunk or the majority of the company is remote on any given day.
That's pretty interesting to hear. One other thing that I'd love to ask is, in the same time that that you were thinking of building it out in 2018, the pandemic, a couple of years later, obviously, the pandemic hit. The pandemic brought on a lot of companies focusing on remote work collaboration, increasing productivity, and how to change the future of work. So you do have a good amount of competition, maybe not directly something like Parsec, a little bit like even Tonari, you may say. And how does all of this competition coming up, or how do stuff like maybe even Miro, right, whiteboarding and stuff, how do you aim to deal with this competition? What do you think will be the ultimate winner? Obviously, everyone has their different niches and different spaces, but what do you think is can define a good winner in the space, or can define who can take a good amount of market share, market chunk in the space of remote work collaboration?
Well, I think first of all, the way I would define competition is, if you're kind of looking at buying something else versus buying us, like direct buyer competition. And so I would more point towards the virtual offices, like there's some great ones that, like, there's Gather, there's Switchboard, there's Teamflow. These are kind of the ones that stand out. But my general philosophy on competition is to work with your competitors and to talk to your competitors. I've talked with most of these companies, and the reason is, have you guys read the Idea Maze blog post?
I don't think I have.
There's a great post. I want to say it was Chris Dixon wrote it on a16z, and the concept is that a startup, especially in the early days, is like an idea. It's like a maze. It's not a marathon. It's not a race, right? Where there's a clear direction and you have to go faster than your competitors, and whoever crosses the finish line first wins. I think that's what it looks like from the outside, but from the inside, it's actually a maze, and there are lots of dead ends, and there are, ways that companies have not succeeded throughout the maze. And by and large, you are more likely to fail to find product market fit than you are for a competitor to crush you. Just like it almost never happens. And so what that means, in a way that's kind of counterintuitive, but kind of freeing, it means like you should probably like just share knowledge with your competitors and try and help each other navigate the maze, because if you can navigate the maze, there will be multiple winners, right? Like if the virtual office becomes a world-changing category, there will be multiple winners.
Sure.
And the category is more important than, any one company. And that's why, like, I would just encourage people who are building a remote team to use a virtual office. Like, of course, I think Tandem's the best, but there are other ones depending on kind of what you're looking for, and like how playful are you looking for the office to be? How 2D or like skeuomorphic are you looking for the office to be? And there's a ton of good options out there.
I think that's pretty interesting, because something like even when we were building our first app or first startup, we were like, okay, we have to win this, and we have to find an idea or find something that no one can probably come close to, and we build this type for this and win. But often we forget that you can have several winners. It's about changing the world from what it is now to hopefully a better place. And that's just a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to look at it. And also, it's the way I prefer to look at it, because I prefer to be collaborative, and like I would rather all of the small startups, displace a large market share from Zoom than try to fight it out.
Makes sense. It's like you were in a different category than most startups that are, say, there's a fintech startup, they're in a space. It's clearly defined, like fintech startups, crypto startups. So you're in a space, you were changing consumer behavior, changing how people think about it. So you're redefining, like people don't know what they actually need. You were giving them the stuff and seeing if this is what you actually need, and then coming back, doing the feedback. I'm pretty sure the Spaces idea came because of the interviews that you've done with customers. So that's nice. So a follow-up question, since you talked about a16z now, I want to see, how was your experience going through like a16z, and you went through YC as well? I remember reading it somewhere. So how was your experience going through these incubators or accelerators and like learning from the amazing mentors that they have? Was it beneficial? Was it not? What are your like key insights to it?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, Y Combinator was an amazing program, and from the outside, what we saw was, hey, there's a prestige here, and it'll probably help with fundraising. That's kind of all we knew, and it did on both of those. But if I were to sum up what we took away, one was really one word: speed. Like, in the early days of a startup, you're trying a lot of different ideas. What's really important is kind of your velocity of working through those ideas. And velocity looks like something very different at every stage. It's usually not working longer. It's usually not writing more code. It's more often talking to customers, changing how you're describing the product, evaluating feedback and changing direction, changing the product, making kind of hard decisions to drop parts of the product. Like on all of these things we navigated, and we did them on a time scale that seemed improbable at first and then really, really worked out. Like I remember one of the first conversations, we were still doing kind of white glove onboarding. We had very, very few, like less than a handful of teams using Tandem. And we were, our plan when we came into Y Combinator was to, just build for a few more weeks to get the basic table stakes features, and then launch to our group, and then launch to our batch, and then launch to YC, and then launch to Product Hunt. And I remember Gustav, who's one of our partners, amazing kind of growth thinker from Airbnb and one of the YC partners, he said, okay, so that timeline, why don't you launch to your group tomorrow, launch to your batch like in 3 days, and then on Tuesday launch to Product Hunt. It was just like a complete, and we're like, we can't do that. And then it's like, why not? And kind of pushed into that. And as we started thinking about it, we realized, we just have to know. We will get more signal from these launches than from sitting on our hands, essentially, and like polishing and polishing and polishing. We have to know whether people want this. And that we launched several times in quick succession. First few launches didn't go that well, but they gave us a lot of feedback. We simplified the product, and then Product Hunt, it started taking off.
That's actually so cool that I think you were talking about Gustav Elstromer from
Yes.
Airbnb. Yeah. So what are these key pieces of advice that you think you've received, that you think when people are building out, like especially considering our audience, high school students, college students, even if they're ideating or at the early stages, what do you think are key things they should not forget or they should focus on when building out something?
I think this is going to be very cliche, but just remember that the goal is to make something people want, to borrow Y Combinator's slogan.
Yeah.
And yes, it's cool to make something differentiated. Yes, it's good to make something that like you believe people need. Actually, there's a really interesting distinction between making something people need and making something people want.
Yeah.
One of our earlier pivots was building a personal finance app that tried to give you clarity on your personal finances, help you save. And, again, our experience will not be other people's experience. We have certain strengths as founders and certain weaknesses. But despite lots of iteration on the product, we could not get people to use it. Personal finances are stressful, and people either were not stressed by them and didn't need an app, or were stressed by them and were too stressed to kind of open the app. And so this is an example of we really believed in the problem. We knew it was a problem. People who we showed it to knew it was a problem, but it wasn't something, that format was not something people wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a hard thing to realize and kind of navigate.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah, so it was really amazing to have you. Just to wrap it up, Rajiv is a great leader and visionary. He worked at Yahoo and now he's building Tandem, and he gives some great advice out of a16z, future of work, Y Combinator, and some great advice to our audience like high school and college students. Thank you so much once again, Rajiv. It was amazing to have you. We appreciate taking the time.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.